like preserved historical writings.
So you mean the pagans and the Jews, the Romans, the Greeks, the Babylonians, the Assyrians, the Egyptians, and the Jews would have been interacting with the Arabs. None of them would mention that there is this shrine in Mecca that goes back to Ishmael? These literate societies that have been around for thousands of years? Because you're telling me the Kaaba was built at the time of Abraham. Well, that's 2,000 years before Christ. So you're saying 2,000 years from Abraham to Jesus, not a single mention of this holy house built by Ishmael or Abraham, not even from the Jews in their own writings?
Another possible reference comes from Strabo's report in his book, Geography, Book 15th. This book, dated to 22 AD, does not mention the city of Mecca. Instead, it provides a description of the Hijaz coastline and a city called Nagrani. However, once again, there is no certainty that Nagrani is Mecca. Thus, the association between Mecca and Bakka is merely a matter of assumption, since there is no pre-Islamic evidence supporting it. Likewise, there is no evidence linking Mecca as a major place of worship from the era of Abraham until the rise of Islam.
Can you prove to me historically, archaeologically, Abraham and Ishmael were in Mecca and they built the Kaaba? What proof do you have aside from Muhammad in the Hadith?
I don't have anything other than the Quran, but where did you get the idea that like pagans did the circling of the Kaaba?
How many idols were in the Kaaba?
365.
Why do you think there are 360 idols in the Kaaba? Because the pagans had no storage, so they decided just to put the stones there, the idols there?
In Sahih al-Bukhari 1602, it is mentioned that before Islam, the Quraysh performed Tawaf around the Kaaba while naked, considering their clothes impure. This proves that the practice of Tawaf around the Kaaba was not something introduced by Islam, but was already a tradition of idol worshippers before Muhammad. In Quran 8:35, Allah condemns the Quraysh for performing rituals around the Kaaba with whistling and clapping. Why would Allah condemn these rituals if the Kaaba had always belonged exclusively to Islam? Clearly, before Islam, pagans were already performing religious rites around the Kaaba. According to Ibn Ishaq in Sirah Rasulullah, before Islam, the Kaaba was surrounded by 360 idols, and the Quraysh regarded it as the center of their deity worship. Even Muhammad himself, in a hadith narrated by Ahmad 12:526, ordered the destruction of the idols around the Kaaba after the conquest of Mecca. So, if a Muslim demands proof that pagans performed rituals around the Kaaba, the answer is evident from Islamic sources themselves.
I think I'm not sure, it has something to do with the calendar?
No, it has nothing to do with the calendar. It has to do with the fact that the Kaaba was a shrine for the god that they believed was a chief god, and they would come and perform rites in honor of the god, and then they housed their gods and goddesses there to honor them as well. Because if you're telling me they didn't perform these practices, which I'll show you they did from your own hadith, then how in the world did that Kaaba end up with 360 idols that Muhammad then later on destroyed?
I'm not sure.
Okay, now, so the whole point is, even your Muslim scholars will tell you the pagans before Muhammad would circumambulate the Kaaba, run around 7 times, because this was part of their practice. But they say that's because they inherited from Ishmael, who taught it to them, but then they corrupted its meaning.
Yeah.
So that's an admission the pagans did it. But now you're trying to explain away, saying, well, the reason why they did it is because Ishmael was the one who built the Kaaba with Abraham. He taught his descendants how to perform the rites around this building in honor of the God of Ishmael, but then his descendants later on corrupted it and turned it into a pagan festival, and then Muhammad restored it. So that's right. So at least we're admitting the pagans did it, but now you need to prove it's not a pagan practice that originated from paganism, but from Ishmael. What's your proof?
The Quran says that Abraham and his son built the first house of Allah, and that's the
I'll
Kaaba.
give you $1 million to show me in the Quran where it says that's the Kaaba in Mecca. Chapter 2 of the Quran, verse 127 to 133. Show me where it says this house they built was in Mecca, and it's the Kaaba. That's where it says Abraham and Ishmael supposedly built this house. Where did they build it? Show me from the Quran. It says the Kaaba in Mecca. Read it to me.
So I'm reading it. And remember when Abraham raised the foundation of the house with
Where?
Ishmael? Oh, it doesn't say where, but in the
Exactly.
footnotes it says the sacred house.
I didn't know the
Kaaba.
footnotes was sent down by Jibreel. Gabriel brought down your footnotes. I don't care about your footnotes. Give me the text, the Arabic. Where does it say this house they built was in Kaaba in Mecca?
I can't show you.
Good. Now go to chapter 3, verse 96.
Okay, surely the first house of worship established for humanity is the one at Becca, blessed sanctuary, and a guide for all
Okay, now
people.
prove to me Becca is Mecca. Prove it.
I don't think I can.
Exactly. If you go by the Quran, you have no idea where Becca is because there are many places that had the same name. And you have no proof that the house that Abraham Ishmael built is in Mecca, and it's the Kaaba. That comes from the Islamic tradition in 200 years after the death of Muhammad, or over 100 years after the death of Muhammad.
When a Muslim claims that the ritual of Tawaf around the Kaaba originates from Ishmael, this claim requires historical and textual evidence. However, there is not a single early Islamic source that explicitly proves that Ishmael performed Tawaf. On the contrary, all available evidence shows that Tawaf was a ritual practiced by pagans long before Muhammad. The Quran never states that Ishmael or Abraham performed Tawaf. The only verse frequently cited by Muslims is Surah 2:125, which states, "And we commanded Abraham and Ishmael, purify my house for those who perform Tawaf, those who stay for worship, those who bow, and those who prostrate." However, this verse does not mention that Ishmael or Abraham themselves performed Tawaf. It merely states that they were commanded to cleanse the Kaaba. This is not evidence that Tawaf was a ritual from their time. Sahih al-Bukhari 1602 explicitly states that pre-Islamic Arabs were already performing Tawaf, even while naked, which is clearly a pagan practice. How can a ritual supposedly taught by a prophet of God, Ishmael, be performed naked and filled with elements of paganism? If Ishmael truly taught Tawaf to his descendants as an act of worship to the one true God, we should find traces of this ritual in early Jewish or Christian traditions. However, there is not a single Jewish or Christian source that mentions Ishmael's descendants performing Tawaf around a sacred structure. On the contrary, Jewish sources describe Ishmael's descendants as nomadic tribes living in the desert, with no structured religious traditions centered around the Kaaba. This strongly suggests that the claim that Ishmael established the ritual of Tawaf is a later Islamic invention with no historical basis.
So I want you to give me some conclusive, historical, archaeological, textual proof before Islam. Quote me some historian, quote me some archaeologist that uncovered some archaeological inscription before Islam and the Quran that says Ishmael settled in Mecca and built the Kaaba with Abraham.
I don't think I can, but do you think it might be possible that because this was an illiterate community in Arabia, that they don't have preserved historical writings?
So you mean the pagans and the Jews, the Romans, the Greeks, the Babylonians, the Assyrians, the Egyptians, and the Jews would have been interacting with the Arabs. None of them would mention that there is this shrine in Mecca that goes back to Ishmael? These literate societies that have been around for thousands of years, because you're telling me the Kaaba was built at the time of Abraham. Well, that's 2,000 years before Christ. So you're saying 2,000 years from Abraham to Jesus, not a single mention of this holy house built by Ishmael or Abraham, not even from the Jews in their own writings?
I don't know.
Of course you don't know, because there is no proof. That's my point. You blindly followed the lies that you were handed by the Muslims. The point I'm trying to get at is your religion is paganism. You bow to a structure. You don't know why you're bowing to it. The Jews knew why they were bowing to the temple, because God said, I'm going to be here with you in this house in a unique way. Put that aside. You're bowing to a statue or building. Your prophet kissed and smothered a black stone that he said became black from the sins of those that touch it, because it absorbs their sin. And that black stone is going to come to life with 2 eyes and a tongue to intercede for you. And you still think you're a monotheist. And this religion makes more sense than Christianity.
Muslim friends claim that the city of Mecca is the center of Islam and the heart of history. According to them, the first house of worship established for mankind was in Mecca, blessed and a guidance for humanity. Surah 396. According to Islamic tradition, Adam placed the black stone inside the Kaaba. Meanwhile, according to the Quran, Surah 2, 125, 127, it was Abraham and Ishmael who rebuilt the Kaaba years later. Thus, Muslims regard Mecca as the first and most important city in the world. However, nowhere does the Quran provide evidence that Abraham or Ishmael ever performed Tawaf. Furthermore, the historical existence of Mecca during Abraham's time remains highly disputed, as there is no archaeological or historical evidence confirming its significance before Islam. Research conducted by Patricia Crone and Michael Cook in their book, Hagarism, The Making of the Islamic World, 1977, suggests that the only possible pre-Islamic mention of Mecca comes from the 2nd century historian Ptolemy, who refers to a city called Makaraba. However, this identification is uncertain, as Makaraba is only mentioned briefly without definitive proof that it refers to Mecca. Another possible reference comes from Strabo's report in his book Geography, Book 15th. This book, dated to 22 AD, does not mention the city of Mecca. Instead, it provides a description of the Hijaz coastline and a city called Nagrani. However, once again, there is no certainty that Nagrani is Mecca. Thus, the association between Mecca and Baka is merely a matter of assumption, since there is no pre-Islamic evidence supporting it. Likewise, there is no evidence linking Mecca as a major place of worship from the era of Abraham until the rise of Islam.